Cloudcast Media. Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and we are so pleased to have in the studio with us today Michael Campbell. He is the attorney and owner of Campbell Law. And full disclosure, Michael and I are working on some projects together. And thank you very much for being a sponsor of one of Cloudcast shows. I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Absolutely. So, Michael, where are you from originally?
I am from Liverpool, England originally. I've been in the U.S. for about almost 20 years now.
Yeah, I hear the bean. Very, very good. That is something that I can pick up in that aspect of it. Were you always interested in law?
Yeah, I guess so. Involuntarily, probably from the beginning. My dad was a lawyer, so I kind of got raised with that in the background. So that was the natural path for me. And I ended up going to law school in the UK.
Okay.
And then moved over here when I was about 25 years old.
Is that right? Now, the type of law that did you do any practicing in over across the pond, as they say, or did you do all the practicing over here?
No, I did. I practiced in the UK for a couple of years before I moved. I primarily took care of some trade unions in the UK, helped them with their issues, and then I moved over here and kind of carried on that employment-based stuff.
Right, but you do all types of law, is that correct?
That is correct. I'm kind of...
Jack of all trades?
I hesitate to say that. That means jack of all trades and a master of none, right?
Master of many.
Yeah, I try my best. Over the years, I've had exposure to a lot of things, so I try and keep my hand in with most stuff.
Yeah, very good. And I know you had worked with a law firm, of which I'm very familiar with, because I have some friends that worked there with Higgs Fletcher, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day. But you started doing your own law how long ago?
Well, I was fortunate to become a partner at Higgs Fletcher back in the early 2010s. And
right.
I moved out on my own in about 2019.
Right.
So it's been about 4 years now. I have my own business, and that's got its own hurdles, and it's been an adventure, but I love it. It's been a great move for me.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody who has done their own business, I worked many, many years for San Diego Unified, and then went to San Diego Union Tribune for even more years. But I had, some businesses that I still own, but now I'm exclusively just pretty much run my own businesses, even though I consult for other groups. So someone was asking me, well, how do you like it? I said, I love the flexibility. I can yell at the boss who I see in the mirror every day in that aspect of it. And listen, but there's no one, when you turn around and say whose responsibility it is, it's yours to do it, correct?
That is the way it goes. It provides, like you say, the flexibility, but it gives me a whole new appreciation for the people that I represent, right? So I've been looking after employers for all these years, and I've understood, or I thought I understood their problems, and now I actually get to live them, and it's been eye-opening.
Right, very good. So, you've been, in the business for a while now. We can have probably a 40-hour discussion on this aspect of it. What have you seen as some of the major shifts in your industry? And obviously, that's a wide swath, because there's different types of law: financial law, corporate law, First Amendment law, blah, blah, blah. But as a whole, is there a big shift, or really just depends on the category?
I think practically COVID changed a lot. I think what happened is we embraced technology a lot more. A lot of my things now are done by Zoom. We have judges now that are more than happy to have the hearing done by Zoom or Teams. Depositions now, I can take a deposition of a guy in Texas, whereas previously I'd have to fly out there. It was a 4-day trip. I'd have to bill the client thousands of dollars. Now I can do it from my office in 2 hours, and it's a big savings to the client. But in my business, at least culturally, we've had a huge change in the last 5, 6, 8 years. A lot of my cases involve some form of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and the standards on all that stuff has completely changed. We have definitions now that just didn't exist 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So that's been a big change.
And do you think that'll shift back? And listen, we'll talk about the discrimination or the harassment or whatever the case may be. Listen, sometimes it looks like, man, this is an overreach. Are you kidding me? And listen, that's not to sit there and give the Weinsteins and the Cosbys and the so forths a pass, because they don't deserve it. The ones who were found guilty, of course, obviously.
Correct.
But some of this other stuff is wow. That's something. Do you see that there's a little bit of an overreach that may come back to the middle, or maybe it's going to take some time?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I hesitate to call it an overreach. I think it's just a reaction to, again, the culture. I think what we're seeing in real life, we're starting to see in the courtrooms.
Right.
And there definitely is, I think, an evening out of sorts. I think we're getting back to a more common sense approach to these things, which I think is helpful for my clients and other employers. I think what's going to happen eventually is we're all, as a culture, going to become more comfortable with these things and more used to them.
Yeah.
And I think that the things that affect the people that are being discriminated against or feel like they are is going to become more accepted. And I think that's what's going to really drive how the law looks at it. Right now, it's very protective of people's rights, which I think it should be.
Right.
But I think there is also a balance. I think as an employer, you don't want to be in a situation where you're scared to do anything. And I think we're broaching on that sometimes between the rules that we have about how we pay people, how we take breaks, how we pay overtime, combined with how we can, where we have to protect people's civil liberties. That's a balancing act always. But I think we're starting to see more common sense, especially with some of the technical things. I think some of the technical decisions the law now provides for are more common sense. So hopefully that's the direction we're going in.
Yeah, I hope so in this because, listen, it should never excuse, unacceptable behavior. I mean, bottom line. And someone shouldn't get a pass for that as well. But, and we're talking about, in this area, some of the harassment or whatever the case may be. I'm sure there's other areas that have just gone, whoa, man, that is way overboard. Mm-hmm. My passion, because it was one of my favorite subjects when I was getting my master's degree and undergrad degree is law of mass comm. I love comm law in First Amendment stuff. It fascinates me, slander and libel and so forth, and seeing what is happening with the former president. And and I got to tell you, listen, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. There's some things you shouldn't be doing, and I'm sort of. The Fox News thing was fascinating for me, being a former journalist and a media guy on this. And I was telling my friends, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. I said, no, they absolutely had to settle. Whether they had to settle for $900 million or not is who knows, but probably more than the $1.8 billion they would have lost if they went to court. And I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about. I'm not a lawyer, for God's sake, but I do know a little bit about First Amendment law. And someone said, well, why are you saying that? I said, well, listen, they absolutely breached. That was malicious. And that was malicious because they had people that knew what they were saying was false. And it's on air that they were saying it's false, Right. And they can't win that argument. No, we really not. They were absolutely shot going into it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, starting backwards, I think most lawyers who looked at this case knew that it was not going to see the inside of a courtroom. I think
100%.
That was, the potential witnesses in that case were going to be outrageous. The legal side of it, I think we have a tendency to look at what we see in the news and then start playing, quarterback on a case. We have no idea on the facts. I think, this was a massive case. I think there was a whole bunch of moving parts. The numbers that were settled for, I think that's realistic. What we were talking about here was a company in Dominion, I think it was, that they, their reputation was all they had to sell. The veracity of the results generated by their machines was their product. So the question of it, they had to do something. I thought from a legal side of it, the discovery that was done in that case in terms of finding out all these text messages and emails, and to me that was the most interesting, because I see every day in cases I have where everyone's trying to fight to restrict what you give the other side, and you've got to play within the rules, but the rules are there. So the fact that they got all that stuff, it made me question what was the stuff they didn't get. What was out there that they didn't see and we didn't see, and that probably would have come out through trial. So so I wasn't surprised. What I was surprised about was some of the flagrancy of the things that were being said behind closed doors about the reality of what they were saying on the news. I think that's eye-opening to all of us, and I'm sure, speaking to your point in terms of the extremes of our political landscape right now, I'm sure it's going on everywhere.
Well, we're chatting with Michael Campbell, attorney and owner of Campbell Law. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the community show, the nation's longest running community podcast. We're now in our 17th year here, broadcasting from the Mission Fed studios in Scripps Ranch. Mission Fed's been doing great things for San Diegans for more than 60 years. Again, that case is absolutely just fascinating to me for those reasons. And I just thought they were dead in the right when they saw all these text messages. And of course, the judge went haywire when, what do you mean Murdoch isn't involved in the organization? I mean, you don't think he's going to find out? I mean, what is wrong with you guys? You delusional? And the answer is yes, they were delusional, know. I think from a journalist standpoint, I'm so glad to see that. One of the things I know it's near and dear to your heart is to empower your clients. Okay, talk about what that means.
I think sometimes the people I talk to feel a sense of helplessness about how they handle all these issues. They look at, as an employer, for example, you're looking around saying, I have all these rules that I got to follow, and how do I do it while still making money and growing my business? And a lot of the time, those rules can be seen as like impediments to that. And part of empowering the clients is to, one, just give them the knowledge that they need to be able to make decisions day to day, and that doesn't involve giving them the California labor code and saying, okay, read that and figure it out. It's about saying, okay, this is what I see. I've done this, been doing this 20 years now. These are the things I see most commonly.
Right.
These are the red flags you need to look for. These are the things that if you're doing it, stop doing it. Just yesterday, I gave a presentation to one of my clients and met with all the executive team, and just through that process, at the end of it, a couple of them came up to me at the end and said, I feel like kind of a weight off my shoulders now. It's kind of like going to see your accountant to do your taxes. You kind of dread it. And then as you walk out afterwards, you feel better because you kind of embrace the problem. And then, it's a lot of it is, if you're dealing with good people trying to do the right thing, my job's a lot easier.
That's spot on. We'll come back. We're going to chat more with Michael Campbell, attorney and owner of Campbell Law, talk about the changing the perception of the legal industry, and certainly want to, shout out, those folks that say, hey, listen, I liked what I heard here. Would love to have a chat with him, and maybe he can, give us some feedback on X, Y, and Z, not to get free advice. You have to make a living, of course. That's not the point on this. I love how people go, hey, you don't mind doing this. I always used to laugh at this when I'd give some advice and consulting. I get paid to be a consultant in that aspect of it. And listen, we're not going to sit there and charge somebody that's $500. That's the last time you'll see the $500 because they're never going to do it again. But listen, you also have a living to make as well on that. So we'll chat a little bit about that as well, and maybe some of the the pro bono work you do as well. When we again return with Michael Campbell, attorney and owner of Campbell Law. We will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg, and you're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest-running community podcast. We're now in our 17th year here at the Mission Fed Studios and Scripps Ranch. Mission Fed's been doing great things for San Diegans for more than 60 years. Honored to have in the studio with us today Michael Campbell, attorney and owner of Campbell Law. Right before break, we were talking about how do you change the perception of the legal industry, and what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm not arrogant enough to think I can do it by myself, but I think the people I've worked with, at least in the last 5 years, 10 years or so, we are definitely trying to move closer towards what we should be, which is a service industry. We are here to provide a service. I think there's a few things that have become a problem in the way that we're perceived. I think the financial side of things has always been an issue. I think we're viewed as we're overpaid, we're overpriced, we charge too much. We do work that maybe isn't necessary to be able to bill more time. So I think that's something I really value. I think I try to be fair. I try to be reasonable. I think that's a big thing. I think if people get the impression from you that you are trying to just do the right thing, try to be economical with their money, because at the end of the day, if you're respectful of their money, they interpret that as respect for them. The other thing is this stigma that's attached to lawyers. We're perceived as these heartless monsters who can take advantage of people, and we make things up as necessary. I can honestly tell you, like, hand on my heart, I know lots and lots of lawyers, and I can count on one hand how many people fit that stereotype.
Right. Well, I mean, listen, perception's reality, unfortunately. You'll see it in politics, you'll see it with lawyers, you'll see it with journalists. And my former profession, and even though I just went over to the dark side of journalism, to the business side, running community and public relations, I was spokesperson, as I think I might mention to you, for the UT for 11 years. But journalists, I think, in terms of credibility, I think they've now surpassed the floor of politicians, which is almost impossible. When Congress, I think, is a little bit ahead of us, and a lot of that is based on falsehoods. I tell people this all the time, Michael, almost in the same vein you're talking about. A handful of some bad apples. There's a handful of bad apples in a lot of places, for that matter. Mm-hmm. Journalists, no question about that as well. We do not do fake news. Okay, we publish the news. If you disagree with us, it doesn't make it fake. Mm-hmm. It just means you disagree with us. And somehow it's been tough for our industry to change the narrative to say it's not fake. You just disagree with it. Right. And you can't say it enough. I say it all the time when I was giving speeches on behalf of the Union Tribune or the media in general, and I'll continue to say that in that aspect of it. And it's the same thing about lawyers, or it's doctors, or pick a topic on it. I think you're spot on that. But I think it's what it is you represent lawyers with your clients, and they're going to say, my God, here's Michael doing X, Y, and Z. And he goes, you know what? Here, let's just handle it this way, and that's it, And, you'll give him a fair bill if a bill at all. Mm-hmm. You'll make that decision with every individual. And what? You're not going to charge me, because you picked up the phone and said, hi, my name is Michael, right, on it. And, I think that makes a big difference. And we just had a conversation with one of our previous guests, Michael, about trust. Everything comes down to trust. Lawyers, journalists, doctors, and all that. So that's terrific. So your goal, obviously, you want to grow what you're doing in your industry or in your practice, you say. Is there a certain area you want to grow it, or employment law is pretty much your bread and butter? Yeah,
not so much really in scope of practice. It's more in terms of recruitment of new people. I as I came through and as I was younger, I really got the benefit of good mentors, and I had the benefits of that. And I want to be able to, at least to the extent I can, pass some of that along. And I see a lot of new young lawyers coming out, and they're coming out with these giant, loans and debts. And
it's like doctors,
right?
Or regular students,
right? And there's more lawyers than there are jobs. And I think there's a lot of good potential lawyers out there that are kind of slipping through the cracks. And I think it'd be good to kind of grow that. And I, it doesn't matter if I have a view of, like what we've talked about today. If I have a view of how I want the law to look, and I want to practice law the way I want to practice it, if I don't pass that to somebody else, what's the point? I mean, I've kind of,
that's great.
It kind of dies with me. So I'm certainly don't pretend to be some kind of like leading light in the industry. I just think that there's room for practices like mine with perspectives like mine. And I think if I can grow that, I think it'd be beneficial to both me and to the practice, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, from as little as you and I have chatted about some things, I'll guarantee you're the right wavelength with that as well. And it's a great model to work with other people that are fall in that vein. It's interesting. You talk about stresses in life, right? And they say the number one stress, or one of the number one stresses, is what I do, speaking in public. I talk in front of groups of 3,000, sometimes in 500, and sometimes, in this audience, and to me, it's natural. Mm-hmm. For some people, they'd rather pull their eyeballs out, and then do public speaking. But for some people, being in a courtroom or you know how this stuff works. Oh my God, what have I just done? Am I going to be in San Quentin for the next 55 years? Mm-hmm. And, it's natural for you. You're a lawyer. You know what you can say and what you can do and all that business. And it's calm and say, don't worry about it. And almost like what you're talking about, empowering the clients to say, relax. If they've done something where they should not be relaxed, and you're going to tell them, I get that. But listen, because that is so intimidating. And maybe people are watching too much forensic files and say, okay, I was at that person's house. How did my hair get loose? And that next thing you know, I'm going to be done on this. I think that's really important. What can our listeners do to support your efforts? You can go to your website, make recommendations. What can they do?
Yeah, we've got a website there. We've got my, obviously you can always contact me. You mentioned something before the break, and I never hesitate to have an initial phone call with people, and it will be free. I'll give you my time.
That's wonderful.
The point of this is to find out if we can work together. The analogy I can sometimes use is if you went to buy a new car, and the guy said to you, okay, well, I want $500 up front before we can talk about this car. You go find the next lot, right? So
100%.
Yeah. So my job is, first and foremost, is to find out if I can help. I mean, there's a lot of people call me and, they might ask me about, okay, I'm going through a divorce. And I say, well, that's not what I do. I hand it down the line. But if you've got an employment problem, you got something going on, I do all kinds of stuff. I do business disputes. I do personal injuries. It's always worth a phone call. So, and if I can't help you, I'll tell you and I'll pass you on to someone that can.
And that's the most important thing. And I think on anything, and I do some consulting with some people on dealing with the press, and dealing with the public. I mean, the last thing somebody wants is their name in lights saying you've done something, crazy, even though the allegations are unproven. But guess what? We better be very, very careful about what we put in the press. Because it's gone and it's there, and the press doesn't go away; it's still there. Right. So you better be careful about that type of stuff. So I think that's important too. Michael, really appreciate you coming on and giving us some of your time. I know you're drinking out of a fire hose, as a lot of lawyers are, and I'd love to have you come back on and maybe talk about a certain aspect of employment law. Here's an emerging field, or here's some things we should look at. Your call, not to try to get free advice to everybody on it, but I think it's the folks that come on and talk about what they do, it doesn't hurt about what that. So I'd love to have you do that.
Be more than happy to.
Yeah, that's very good. We've been chatting with Michael Campbell, attorney and owner of Campbell Law. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest continuous running community podcast. We're now in our 17th year as we've been broadcasting from Mission Fed Studios and Scripps Ranch. Mission Fed doing phenomenal work for raising the bar for many folks in our community for more than 60 years. We hope you enjoyed the show.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.